A few people have written in about the nitrogen execution in Alabama.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
So here's an article from the AP. This particular one was sent in by Janae. And I've been meaning to look further into this. And I looked, and I wish I hadn't. So I'm going to read you the initial article, and I'm going to spare you. We'll get to it.
You? Okay.
I would prefer to, because I don't really want to revisit it myself.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
An Alabama death row inmate filed a lawsuit Thursday that challenges the constitutionality of nitrogen gas executions, arguing that the first person in the nation put to death by that method shook violently for several minutes in a, quote, a human experiment that officials botched miserably.
Oh my God.
That's horrifying.
Yeah. The lawsuit filed in federal court in Alabama alleges the January execution, I think it was January 25th of this year, 2024. The January execution of Kenneth Eugene Smith by nitrogen gas was torturous and, quote, cannot be allowed to be repeated. And just in case you're wondering, Smith was found guilty, convicted of a murder for hire plot where he killed a woman whose husband hired him to kill.
Him to do it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, we're all
irrelevant.
All of us on this show are not proponents of the death penalty, and this should make you even less of a proponent of the death penalty.
It's just part of the rhetoric of this is like, and here's why he might have deserved it.
Right.
Or I guess the state has decided he deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will say that this particular article didn't talk about that. I Googled it on my own just because I was curious. I also feel like I should just say that he was a white man.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I personally don't think that anyone deserves the death penalty, and we'll fucking get to it. So the lawsuit says descriptions from witnesses that Smith shook and convulsed contradicted the state's promises to federal judges that nitrogen would provide a quick and humane death.
Okay, so the state is saying this is a peaceful method.
The state said that it would take just a few seconds. And witnesses were like,
are saying this was a nightmare.
That is not what happened. Yes.
Okay. And the empirical evidence requires that it actually somebody has to go through it.
Right.
Yeah. And he was the first one to go through it.
Oh,
so, quote, the results of the first human experiment are now in, and they demonstrate that nitrogen gas asphyxiation is neither quick nor painless, but agonizing and painful, said attorney Bernard E. Harcourt in the lawsuit. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of death row inmate David Philip Wilson, who was sentenced to death after he was convicted of killing a man during a 2004 burglary. So it's a different guy.
Oh, it's like the next person.
I think it's like the next person. Yeah. So like the next person's lawyer was like,
we're not doing it like this.
First one didn't go that well.
Yeah.
The lawsuit seeks a declaratory judgment that the current nitrogen gas asphyxiation protocol violates the inmate's constitutional right to protection from cruel and unusual punishment. Alabama last month became the first state to use nitrogen gas to put an inmate to death. Nitrogen gas is authorized in 3 states currently that are Alabama, which is the state that did it, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, but no other state had previously attempted to use it. So this nitrogen gas thing, the method is called physiologically inert gases. Okay. So this means that the gas has nitrogen in it and no oxygen in it. So you're still breathing, but you're not getting any oxygen, so your cells die. So you're still breathing a gas, but it's not the one you need. It's not like suffocation. It's like cellular suffocation. It's still asphyxiation, but it's not suffocation. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like that. that seems like a conceptually acceptable method, but in practice,
physiologically, you're still breathing some sort of gas, but it is not oxygen. But that's kind of what a lot of like assisted suicides use physiologically inert gases.
Okay.
So people have elected to do this and it's gone better?
Yeah, there are different gases that are used for it, like helium was one of them. But they use nitrogen for this one, and I'm not obviously a chemist, so I don't really know what the differences are, but it has been used in the past, like this method.
What's the laughing gas? What is that? Obviously, you're not like going that far, but when you like,
it's
nitrogen,
nitrous or something,
nitrous oxide,
oxide, yeah.
It came into my head, so it feels like it's probably right. So, as a chemist, as a chemipology major,
as someone who was in our high school production of Little Shop of Horrors, we know that you're
basically a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So gases, you can play with the amounts of oxygen and other chemicals in it. So like laughing gas, it would have obviously a substantial, adequate amount of oxygen in it in addition to the nitrous oxide. But this gas it has such a little concentration of oxygen or no oxygen. It's just other gases so that it kills you.
I don't know what the protocol is with state sanctioned
the death penalty,
the death penalty. But from what I have read and watched in like documentaries about assisted suicide, like medically assisted suicide, you're also the recipient, at least from what I've seen, also gets like some sedation and like calm, like anti-anxiety, like things that are going to make them comfortable before you initiate, in this instance, say cellular suffocation, cellular death. But I wonder if the same is extended to inmates on death row.
I would not
be surprised if it wasn't.
It doesn't sound like it. And I doubt it also, just like on a
gut feeling level.
Expenses wise.
Right.
You know, everything's 100 times more expensive when it goes into like a prison. It's not just a dose of anti-anxiety meds. I'm sure it would be like thousands of dollars. Yeah. And from this article and the things that I read, it does not sound like it.
That's so fucked up.
So during the execution, a respirator face mask, which is normally used in industrial settings to deliver life-preserving oxygen, was strapped to Smith's head. Pure nitrogen gas was pumped into it, causing him to die from a lack of oxygen. So the U.S. Supreme Court allowed Smith's execution to proceed last month. The lawsuit contends that media and witness accounts of the execution contradict the state's prediction to the courts that the nitrogen gas would render Smith unconscious, quote, within seconds. It was not within seconds.
Yeah.
Smith, trigger warning, and again, I'm leaving out the worst parts. Smith shook in thrashing spasms and seizure-like movements for several minutes at the start of the execution. The force of his movements caused the gurney that he was laying on to visibly move, like at least once. But he was like really seizing. Reporters from the Associated Press, the Montgomery Advertiser, the Alabama Reflector, and WHNT attended the execution as media witnesses. Quote, in stark contrast to the Attorney General's representations, the 5 media witnesses chosen by the Alabama Department of Corrections and present at Mr. Smith's execution recounted a prolonged period of consciousness marked by shaking, struggling, and writhing by Mr. Smith for several minutes after the nitrogen gas started flowing, says the lawsuit.
It's honestly... good is the wrong word, but I'm grateful that there were like state-sanctioned media witnesses there who could actually advocate for it's too late for the individual who received this method, but to say like, whoa, this is fucked.
Yeah.
You cannot use this on other people.
Yeah.
Because without that, I mean, if the only testimony you're really getting is more like emotional testimony from, say, survivor's family or the now deceased family, it's like the state's not going to take that shit seriously, but their own sanctioned witnesses that are there from the media to be impartial third party witnesses to this
journalists
kind of event are journalists. It's so fucking important.
This reminds me of the William Williams case that I still think about really frequently, which was in the Minnesota Crimes first live episode.
Yeah.
That you guys did.
The hanging
that got horribly botched. It was the last time that there was capital punishment in Minnesota because there were witness accounts that were so horrific.
Yep.
They were like, here's the reality of what this looked like.
We cannot, it's inhumane. We cannot do this to people. Well, I sure hope you liked that clip. If you did like that clip, make sure you are subscribing to our YouTube channel, leaving us a nice review, and joining us on Patreon for even more video content, audio content, salacious content all around. Come join us. Treat yourself.